25% of employed people in Canada now work for the government. No, I'm not joking. This is just absolutely unbelievable. And obviously it came out with the labor market report that we covered on this channel. So Better Dwelling put this out. A quarter of employed Canadians now work for the government. I mean, this just is getting insane. And think about what that does to labor productivity. Just think about that for a second. Obviously, having so many people work for the government, do you think that they are putting in more regulations and red tape to create more government jobs? Things like tariffs that even Pierre is now talking about all sound the alarm bells in my head of big government. So it's very, very interesting. So Canadian employment doesn't look like it has moved much, but under the surface was a giant shift. Statistics Canada StatCan data shows the number of jobs virtually unchanged in July, growing 1.7%, plus 345,000 jobs over the past year. As a result, the unemployment rate was also flat at 6.4%, adding 0.9 points from last year. Mostly boring until you dive into the details. So Canada's private sector suffers a setback. New norm is low growth. Canada's rapidly growing population isn't driving much private sector growth. Employment in the sector fell 42,000, we covered that, to 13.38 million people in July. Annual growth managed to climb 0.6% over the past year, but that was nowhere near the scale of population growth. And just look at this chart. 1 in 4 Canadians now work for the government, and it basically, the share of total employed Canadians that work for the public sector includes provincial and municipal governments. And you can see how this spiked during 2020, and it's just continuing to rise. It did go down slightly, but it's just continuing to rise here. Now hitting 25%. I mean, this is absolutely nuts. Most Canadian employed growth is now reliant on the public sector. Public sector employment climbed 0.9%, thought 41,000 jobs, very, very, very suspicious, to 4.45 million in July. Annual growth shows 4.8%, 205,000 jobs added, a rate 8x greater than the private sector. Canada's now so dependent on public sector growth that government workers represent 1 in 4 employed workers. And obviously this level of bloating reminds me of Argentina and what happened in Argentina with the bloating of the government. Obviously, when you have government that becomes this large, first of all, let's just remember that 1 in 4 of those people is not creating any goods or services. In fact, you could easily argue that they hinder the creation of goods and services, because one additional government job is probably leading to more red tape, more regulation somewhere, because obviously those government people, they have to do something. So what Canada has done is create an economy that is entirely reliant on government and also real estate, which is absolutely crazy, when the economy used to 10, 20 years ago be more reliant on natural resources, more reliant on producing goods and services. So it's very alarming what's happening here. So Canada is creating fewer entrepreneurs and a bigger government. So you can see how self-employed growth has basically just been stagnant, and meanwhile government growth has just gone parabolic here. I mean, this is not a good thing. This is absolutely the worst thing that you could wish for, because again, this is very inflationary as well, because like I said, the government, they're not producing goods and services. So all those government employees, which generally are commanding higher wages than the private sector as well, means that they're obviously buying goods and services, but when they're buying those goods and services, all that money is directly inflationary into the economy. So if you're not creating a lot of goods and services, it becomes a big problem. And that's why Argentina got into major problems. I mean, Canada doesn't have the problem with its credit rating, and obviously it doesn't have the problems when it comes to the debt yet, but it's definitely getting towards those problems, and it's definitely going to have to increase if you really think about it, because more and more in the future future, do you think each economic downturn is going to lead to more government, more stimulus, or do you think it's going to lead to less government and less stimulus? And I really don't care which political party you side with or support, because at the end of the day, they're always going to try and buy votes. They're always going to want to get elected again. And that's the main problem, because if you really think about it, if they're just trying to get elected next time around, if they just stand there and do nothing, no stimulus, no government job creation, then basically a lot of people are going to be hurting and they'll just vote for an alternative, so they'll get voted out. So it becomes a very kind of vicious cycle once you get into this stimulus cycle. And that's exactly where we are at with the amount of people that are now employed by the government. It's just clearly insane. And obviously you've got the labor market that is not doing well. You've got thousands of people that are going to job fairs. It's happening all over Canada. It wasn't just the C&E job fair. We've seen this at job fairs in Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto, Hamilton, all over the place. So you've got the labor market that is clearly in a bad spot right now. And then you've got the government that is making up 25% of the economy. 25% of employed people working for the government is not a good thing. And also, this came out, Air Canada blames Paris Olympics for hurting sales this summer. I mean, this is wild, the spin that they tried to put on this, but this is why the CEOs are paid the big bucks, supposedly, to put spin on different things. Canada's biggest airline reports 47% profit drop, stung by softening demand in key markets. So this says a lot about what people are going through if they're not spending money on going to places like Europe, because obviously those are the more expensive places to go, especially from Canada. So Air Canada reported a 47% decline in quarterly profit, stung by softening demand in key markets, including France, which some travelers are avoiding this summer due to the Olympic Games. You know, I think that it's kind of stupid that they're blaming the Olympic Games there, because you could equally say, well, okay, so some people might avoid Paris and that area of France. I mean, Paris is a dump. I've been there loads of times. Paris isn't the place that you really think it is and is glamorized by different movies and things like that. I've been to Paris many times. It is kind of a dirty shithole. But anyway, getting off topic there, the people who are avoiding for the Olympic Games are going to be offset by the people who want to go and see the Olympic Games, or the woke Olympic Games, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I didn't watch any of it. It could still be going on right now. I have no idea. I didn't watch any of it. Just no interest in that whatsoever. So Canada's largest airline reported revenue of $5.5 billion for the second quarter, a 2% rise from the same period in 2023. The company has increased flights this year, so passenger revenue per available seat mile was down more than 4%. Now, obviously, think about it. We do not have WestJet's numbers because they're a privately owned company. So we don't know what WestJet is going through, but we can guess it's exactly the same as what is happening with Air Canada here. I mean, I find it absolutely hilarious that they're blaming the Olympics and saying one route is the blame why their profit went down 47%. I mean, if that is the case, then you seriously need to rework your business model. But I think what this says more is how the economy in Canada is getting worse and worse and worse. We saw this with the Canadian Tire CEO that was coming out, and the guidance that Air Canada and Canadian Tire is giving is not getting better. It's just getting worse. They're saying the consumer is in an even worse position and they can't afford to buy these services, essentially, that aren't essential to them. Things like food, they're always going to have to buy. Things like rent are always going to be the necessities of what people are paying. But things like travel to places like Europe, that's definitely going to go down. And obviously, if you're looking to travel, that's a great thing, because you're going to see airline ticket prices that are going to go down, which is actually what's been happening for the past few years since the travel spike that happened after the pandemic when everybody got out. So obviously 1 in 4 people now working for the government, absolutely terrible. We'll continue to monitor this. I think this is only going to rise, in my opinion. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd highly recommend that you check out this video here. And if you're looking for a VPN to protect your privacy, go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. Check the affiliate link in the description, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.